Hey, it's Lisa here with a love note for February 3rd. Today we're going to talk about the heart, and more importantly, the journey from the head to the heart, which for many of us is the longest, hardest, most difficult, and treacherous 18 inches that we will ever travel in our entire lives. And I know that especially for some of you fellas, this idea of getting out of your head and into your heart is particularly troublesome, or might make you say, no, thank you. Trust me, I get it. I was that guy. With boobs, but I was that guy. The heart can be, seem like a treacherous place. You know, I've talked before about when I was a kid, shut my heart down tight. About 11, 12 years old, I was like, screw that. This is nothing but pain and trouble, and I'm done. And so intentionally shut down my heart. And I know I've told this story. My daughter's born, blows my heart wide open. Later, I go to Egypt and put my heart against the Great Sphinx, and it was like a bolt of lightning hit my heart, blew wide open again. I have had plenty of heartbreak since then. I have had plenty of reasons to shut completely and totally down, and have attempted on a couple different times. But every time realized that operating from the space of the heart makes life more enjoyable. It just makes life more enjoyable. When we talk about moving from third dimension to fifth dimension level of consciousness, what we're really talking about is moving from a consciousness that is dominated by the logical mind and by the ego, and into a consciousness that is more driven by the heart, by love, compassion, by empathy, by the unconditional nature of wanting good for everyone, not just for ourselves. And so we have an opportunity to start practicing that right now. And for those of you that go, but wait a minute, I'm really comfortable in my logical left brain. I just want to stay here and not have to deal with the mess of the heart. Hear me out. And just hear me out, because where we're headed, the heart's going to be the norm. The heart's going to be the norm. And so when we start practicing now, it's just going to be easier to make that transition and to enjoy it along the way instead of fighting and resisting the transition as we go. There's a lot right now going on that can hit us in our heart that feels pretty treacherous, that can hit us in the feelers and feel just really heavy. There's plenty in my hometown, in the world. There's plenty right now that's troubling to our hearts. But we have an opportunity to actually use the love within our hearts to transmute even the energies of those troubling situations. And we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the things that, in looking at the difference between the ego operating from mind and ego and operating from heart and soul, is really what's driving you, right? What is driving you? Is it transactional? Transactional, what can I get out of this, is much more of a mind or ego type scenario. If it's more heart, it's more often related to our values. So especially fellas, think for a minute. There's a lot of, think about what drives you. Maybe it's values of things like honor and duty and loyalty, and maybe things like protection and devotion and providing, things like that. All of those are values and things that we might hold intrinsically dear. Not necessarily head things, but more heart-oriented things. Now, the mind is an incredible tool for designing how to make the things that matter to our hearts actually happen. So how to go about honoring and upholding and uplifting those values that we hold within our hearts to make them real out in the world. When we let our mind run the show, though, it can be a wild little tyrant, a wild little tyrant that is disconnected from the things that actually really matter to us at a deeper level. So, when we're thinking about our values too, though, and only willing to apply them when they personally benefit us, that's back to being transactional, and that's back to ego and mind again. So the minute that our values really do start becoming unconditional for everyone, universal for everyone, that's when you know that they're driven more by the heart and more by the soul. And ultimately, fifth dimension, level of consciousness, that is exactly where we're headed. Now, often when we're in our minds, it can be a very scary place, especially some of our minds, but that's where fear operates, right? Is in our minds and is in all the what ifs. And it can also be a very judgmental place. So many of the people that I know, like one of my hesitations out of doing these videos at all is because of some of the people that I know that are very logical left brain thinkers that I also happen to respect and care for a lot. And my fear mind thing of, oh my God, what will they think? They might think I'm nuts, right? Because I know they are so operating in their left mind. The truth is, they're probably the ones that need to hear these videos more than anybody. So here I am. Judge away if you want to. That's on you. But I used to be queen of shutting down and shutting out, that possibility of the pain that goes along with having an open heart. And people who have tried to date me in the past will probably also say that I can still be pretty guarded and I can still, have some walls. And part of that is it that the heart's not open, or is it that there are boundaries and kind of standards and, I don't know, things that I want for myself? And so there's a difference in how to look at that. As far as walls, are you willing to give love? Give it all day long, but then also, are you willing to receive it back? And sometimes that's a little different story that's harder for different people. Often the ego and a closed heart go hand in hand. And so the ego, one of its jobs is to try to keep us safe. One of the reasons we close down our hearts is to try to keep us safe. So those often go hand in hand. But what do we really value, right? If I'm somebody who values freedom, if I'm somebody who values liberty and liberation and things like that, closing down my heart just means that I've imprisoned it. It's the opposite of freedom and liberation. And so there's a way of looking at values and looking at what drives you from the heart and soul level that helps you realize that life can be lived from a different place, and that trying to live life from completely up here, A, is really limiting and limited, and B, it separates us. It separates us from our true nature within ourselves, and it separates us from each other and from other people in our lives that we care about. That's why we often say that to see change in the outer world, we have to do the inner work first. Really, if we can't feel it for ourselves, if we can't feel this unconditional, universal love, compassion, empathy, whatever it might be, passion for life, zest for life, that idea of being loyal to ourselves, to, looking out for, protecting, providing, having duty and honor, all these things that might go along with like what society often considers masculine characteristics, those are still heart-based things. Those are still heart things. And we need to be able to apply them to ourselves. And often that can be a challenge. But what we can't apply to ourselves, we really can't hold for the rest of the world. Because the truth is, how we view our inner world is the lens through which we also view our external world. So if we want the external world to change, we've got to do the inner work to change our own lens, to shift our lens so we're seeing things differently. That inner work is often heart work, to where we have to get out of our heads a bit and feel in our hearts and actually allow ourselves to feel. We can't bypass the stuff in our hearts. Sometimes it feels great. It feels like joy. It feels like freedom. It feels like, woohoo, fantastic. And other times it doesn't. And we've all experienced those other times when it feels like grief, or feels like betrayal, or feels like sadness, or anger, or fear, or guilt, or shame, or all the other stuff that it can feel like. All of those feelings are part of the human experience. Trying to bypass or avoid any of those feelings means that we're bypassing and avoiding one of the most powerful parts of our human experience, which is our heart. Some of you have heard me talk about the Heart Math Institute, which measures and often looks at, the energetics of our body. And what they found is that the electromagnetics put out by the heart is actually 10,000 times more powerful than the electromagnetic energy put out by our brain. So think about that. 10,000 times more powerful the energy, potential energy of our heart. Why would we shut that down? Why would we shut that down when wanting to live an enjoyable, juiced up life? Sometimes we shut it down because we want to avoid the pain, but in avoiding all the pain, we're also avoiding all the good. And there's plenty of pain to go around right now. There really is. And so I asked, when the guides are coming in with this message this morning, I asked them, I'm like, okay, well, what do we do with all the crap? What do we do with all the stuff that feels bad? Because there's plenty right now that does. And they said, this is where the inner work comes in. And they said, one of the things to keep in mind is the heart is an incredible tool for transformation and for transmutation. So transmutation simply means shifting or up-leveling energy. Okay, shifting the way we see it, we look at it, we feel it, but actually also shifting the energy. And just to give a goofy little example, when I moved back to Oklahoma, it's country, right? So there's a lot of roadkill, like a lot of roadkill. So, big dead deer along the side of the roads. I don't know how many possums and squirrels and skunks and, pick your roadkill, dogs, cats, whatever. And it used to just break my heart. I mean, I felt it, my body would go like this and I could feel just the of seeing that. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And it's my family laughs at me. I'll totally, admit to this. But when I see roadkill, I cross myself and say a little prayer to St. Francis, because it's like one thing that I can do that just makes me feel better. It's like it transmutes that energy to where I feel like I'm doing something that's, positive. It's not going to bring the dead animal back, but it's shifting the energy of how I'm perceiving that. And so that's part of, it's a goofy example, but part of kind of the idea of how we can shift the energy. So one of the things that they said, there's so much to feel right now, but if we sink into our heart and its power for transmutation, its power to shift energy. So when we feel sad, for example, we can use the energy of love to nurture and to heal whatever it is, that energy that feels like sadness, to nurture it, to see it, to heal it. When we feel mad, we can use the energy of love to dissipate that anger, to help, bring down the boiling point a little bit, and also to heal or have compassion or even empathy potentially for whatever it is that is just flat pissing us off. Knowing that carrying around sadness and anger doesn't feel good. And it doesn't help. And often when those kinds of energies get stuck in us, they're actually stuck in our mind. And it's all the thinking we're doing around them instead of in our heart. And so, but when we can use that heart energy and the energies of love to help shift them, it can be powerful. Now, the same is true with fear, right? When we're feeling fear, like literally feeling the fear, using the love energy, the energy of love, to bring about and shift that to, feelings of more like faith or trust in ourselves and the divine and others, whatever it might be, but using that heart-based love energy to shift those emotions. Even when it's something like joy, we can even use love energy in our hearts to help anchor and amplify feelings that we want to hang on to, like joy, to find that gratitude and wonder and use the energy of our heart to make that even stronger and anchor that kind of stuff in. The heart is a powerful tool. And where we're heading over time, as we move, Jim, hi, I'm so glad you're listening. As we're moving into higher levels of consciousness, we are being asked to shift the way we show up and operate in the world. And for those of us who have operated for so long from our minds, and especially like left brain type thinking, this trip, the 18 inches from our head to our heart, can feel scary. It can feel onerous. Sometimes society even heaps up a whole bunch of like stigma, and crap around us actually being in our hearts or honoring our feelings, honoring our feeling nature in our heart. We've got to get beyond that, because that is the attitude, that's the prevailing societal context that is also shifting. But that shift comes with us. We are the ones on the leading edge of that shift. We are the ones helping to make that change by making the change within ourselves and showing up to make it safe and okay for other people to embody their heart space, to recognize and appreciate their minds. Absolutely incredible tool to get things done and to make change in this world. But what drives us? What motivates us? Typically, what motivates and drives us is the stuff right here in the middle of our chest, whatever those feelings are that are related to our heart. That's what we want to employ the mind to be able to look out for, promote, protect, honor, be loyal to. All those values that we may hold dear, can we hold them dear to the passions and concern and care in our heart? Because man, that's when we start changing the world. But we first have to do it for ourselves. And when we can do that for ourselves unconditionally, we can apply it universally to everyone else as well. The external world is a mirror of our internal space. If we want the external world to look and feel differently, we got to do the work on the inside. And that work on the inside is made much more powerful and much more possible when we tap into the incredible source of power within our heart. It's love. It's love, y'all. So remember today, in all ways and always, you are loved and you are invited to pay that love forward. Have a great evening.